Welcome, everyone. My name is Rebecca Poole. I'm the Director of Membership and Communication for the Council of New York Cooperatives and Condominiums, or CNYC, a co-op and condo-funded not-for-profit organization providing education, information, and advocacy to and for co-op and condo homeowners throughout New York City. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the District 3 debate on co-op and condo issues for candidates for City Council. CNYC and the Co-op Condo Forum thank the candidates Leslie Boghosian Murphy, Lindsey Boylan, Layla Law-Gisiko, and Carl Wilson for making the time to join us this evening. Co-op and condo homeowners like yourselves are a critical pillar of New York City's housing system. In District 3 alone, there are over 36,000 homes in co-op and condo communities. Co-op and condo homeowners in the district have worked to achieve the city's stated goals by stabilizing and improving their neighborhoods while preserving affordability and self-funding building repairs and improvements. However, new compliance mandates, escalating insurance prices, real estate taxes, utility costs, and one-size-fits-all legislation designed for rental housing are pushing many co-op and condo communities toward financial instability. We've all seen the results in our pocketbooks and our homes: higher maintenance fees or common charges, assessments, deferred repairs, and in some cases, unsustainable receivables and neighbors who must move as incomes simply do not keep pace with rising costs. The questions we've developed will ask the candidates what actions they think City Council should take in light of these issues. We've attempted to work the comments you provided when registering into the 8 questions that will be posed to the candidates this evening. Once the debate is over, we will forward the questions and comments we've received from you, including any in the Q&A this evening, to the candidates to review. We recognize that as New Yorkers, many of you have concerns of a political nature that go beyond affordability, neighborhood issues, and quality of life. The questions do not speak to those outside items, but will focus specifically on how the candidates can address the co-op and condo issues that are impacting you as homeowners. As for the format of this debate, we've allocated 2 minutes per candidate for opening statements, 1.5 minutes per candidate to answer each of the 8 questions, and 2 minutes per candidate for closing statements. A timer with the time allocated for the questions and statements will appear on my video, and we ask the candidates to be as mindful as they can of their speaking time. We anticipate that the debate will conclude shortly after 8 p.m., and we hope you will remain with us through the closing statements. We've used a random draw to determine the order of opening statements, which will be Lindsey Boylan, Carl Wilson, Leslie Boghosian Murphy, and Layla Law-Gisiko. The order will then rotate until we reach closing statements. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Trevor Stewart, who has agreed to moderate the debate this evening. Trevor is a longtime president of his cooperative in District 3. He founded this co-op condo forum approximately 12 years ago to provide an avenue for active neighborhood board members to network and engage with each other for the betterment of their buildings. We believe if lawmakers recognize co-ops and condos for what they are, owner-occupied communities with committed and invested homeowners of varying economic means, we will be able to improve our neighborhoods together and ease our concerns. On that note, Trevor, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Rebecca, and welcome everybody, and thank you so much for your participation. I'm looking forward to this. I'm not going to repeat the stuff that Rebecca said. I think she pretty much covered the ground. And so we'll go straight into the opening statements. And I guess, Lindsey, you're up number 1.
I'm Lindsey Boylan, a proud West Chelsea resident, mom, and urban planner. I know that for tens and thousands of District 3 residents, co-ops and condos are not investment vehicles. They are homes, communities, and one of the last attainable footholds into the middle class in Manhattan. That promise is under pressure. Rising maintenance costs, insurance spikes, utility bills, taxes, and compliance burdens are making it harder for families and seniors to stay in the homes they work so hard to secure. I believe we need a city that supports co-op and condo residents while keeping our commitments to safety, accessibility, and climate resilience. We can do smart regulation without shifting unreasonable burdens on costs onto residents. We can modernize buildings without punishing homeowners, and we can build more pathways to home ownership through models like Penn South, Mitchell-Lama, and limited equity corporations, cooperatives. My approach is simple. Preserve affordability, lower costs where possible, support responsible self-governance, and expand middle-class housing opportunities for the next generation. I'm very excited to be here today, and I'm honored to be included in this important debate and conversation.
Thanks, Lindsey. Carl, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening. And thank you to the Council of New York Co-ops and Condos for hosting tonight's forum. My name is Carl Wilson. I've called the West Side home for over a decade. And for the past 10 years, I've had the honor of serving this community in City Hall, most recently as Chief of Staff to former council member Erik Bottcher. But I started here as a young actor, building a life in this neighborhood here on the West Side. And I've spent my career since then working to give back to the community that gave me opportunity. At the core of my work is a simple belief. New York must remain a place where people can build a life and stay. And that means tackling our affordability crisis head on, whether it's preserving rent-stabilized housing, building new affordable housing, or protecting the pathways that allow people to become homeowners. And that's where co-ops and condos are essential. They are one of the last real entry points to homeownership in New York City. For many middle-class New Yorkers, they are the difference between staying in the city or being priced out. But today, that pathway is under real pressure from rising costs, complex regulations, and policies that too often don't reflect the realities of how these buildings operate. We share the same goals of safety, sustainability, and fairness, but we have to pursue those goals in ways that keep housing affordable and recognize the role that co-ops and condo residents play in the fabric of the city. If elected, I will be a partner. I will make sure your voices are heard early in the process, work to reduce unnecessary burdens, and fight to keep co-op and condos a stable, affordable option for New Yorkers. Because protecting this model of homeownership is not just about the buildings, it's about protecting the future of our city. So thank you very much for putting this together tonight. I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Carl. Leslie,
Thank you. My name is Leslie Boghosian Murphy. Thank you, CNYC, for putting this together. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I've been a resident of this district for over 22 years with my husband, our 13-year-old daughter, Cecilia, and our rescue dog, Bailey. I am the very proud granddaughter of immigrants. All four of my grandparents fled Armenian genocide and ended up right here in New York City, not knowing a stitch of English. And I knew from a very young age they came here for a better life, just like all the immigrants before them and all the ones we see now. My parents owned a small cheese store when I was growing up, and I saw the hard work that went into running a small business. My mom woke up before dawn to head to the store, and my dad came home way after dark, and I used to do my homework behind the counter. And it fostered, I believe, a really strong work ethic and community spirit in me. And it's what I believe led me to journalism. And I worked for years as an Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist, traveling the world, telling stories of the marginalized, uncovering truths, giving a voice to people that otherwise wouldn't have them. And as an avid reader, Trevor, I'm having a little bookcase envy right now with your background. But I had my daughter going on assignment halfway around the world for weeks at a time, became a much tougher sell. So I began to look for opportunities closer to home to get involved and make a difference. The first thing I did was to join and serve on my building's co-op board. I have been the vice president of our co-op board for over 15 years, so I am intimately involved all things internal and external workings of cooperatives in New York City. I was recently elected chair of Community Board 4, voted in unanimously by my peers. I'm on the Launch Advisory Committee of New Yorkers United for Childcare here in New York. We're celebrating big wins recently. I serve on the Port Authority Bus Terminal Advisory Council and the Hudson River Park Trust Advisory Council, and I led the successful Community Task Force for No Casinos. And I think everyone in this room understands the uniqueness of co-op boards and their important place in the ecosystem of New York City. So I think bringing together the facets of shareholders, management, city agencies, vendors, local laws that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leslie. And last but not least, Layla, it's you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Layla Law-Gisiko. I am the president of the City Club of New York, which is a civic organization founded in 1892, committed to sound urbanism as well as good governance. I am the local elected district leader representing Chelsea, and I am the president of the condo in my building. I live in Chelsea. I have lived in this apartment in this building for the past 26 years. years, and I have served for 19 years on my local community board. I actually became involved with my local community board because I was dealing with some quality of life issues that my building, was not able to help, or I guess it fell on me to actually provide this relief. Unbeknownst to me, I had moved on the block where the infamous Limelight is located, and this immigrant girl who came from France did not know what the Limelight was. And when I realized the kind of quality of life issue that I was dealing with, I became involved in my local community board. I realized very soon that the community board actually has a number of tools that are incredibly, incredibly powerful to help actually facilitate residents, including co-op and condo owners. I have found that being a member of my community board while also being the president of my condo has really allowed me to improve the quality of life in my community, as well as in my building itself. I am very excited to run for city council. The building code falls squarely within the responsibility of the city, and a lot of this code actually, provides for what a condo or a co-op is mandated to do. And I look forward to making sure we pass legislation. By the way, I love this music. Thank you so much for this elegant cutoff. I'll just wrap up by saying I would be honored to have your support.
Very sorry about the music. Didn't realize that.
No, I love it.
Oh, that's great. You don't have to watch the clock, see? So good. Great, thanks very much, Layla. So let's go straight into the questions then. The first question, and this will be answered in the order of Carl, Leslie, Layla, and then Lindsey. So the question is this. Council District 3 has over 36,000 co-op and condo homes, as Rebecca mentioned in her introductory remarks. So the main question is, what actions would you take to ensure that you understand and the council understands the needs of co-op and condo homeowners in your district? And how would you help ensure that these needs are heard and understood in the city council? And then a related follow-on to that is, what role do you see for co-op and condo homeowners to play in shaping the city's policies as they relate to housing and the quality of life issues? Carl, over to you.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. The co-op and condos make up a significant portion of Council District 3, and not just here, but they are contribute $12 billion a year in property taxes to the city. So I agree that there is an underrepresentation issue at City Hall. And I feel that too often laws are passed without fully understanding the real world impact on the buildings. So as council member, I would love to do, I would like to take steps to ensure that you're at the table early in the legislative process and not just reacting after the fact. So, and I know Rebecca has done a lot of great work trying to bridge the gap. I came to one of the meetings about a year ago in Hell's Kitchen, but I think we need to have a more routine meeting pattern. I'd love to have some kind of regularly meeting roundtable or working group on condo issues so that we can hold regular engagement with boards and with residents. And we need to start treating co-op and condos owners the same way we talk about renters, that they're an essential fabric to the affordability of this city. So I will have an open door. I want to meet with you regularly, and I'd like to bring in decision makers. In fact, I was just out on the street campaigning with Speaker Julie Menon, and I was talking to her about some of the issues that I thought were going to be discussed tonight and how we need to bring people into the table. And so I'm going to leverage those relationships so that your voices are heard when we're making policy.
Thanks, Carl. Leslie?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in my open, I'm intimately involved in a lot of the co-op and condo issues, being on my co-op board for a very, very long time. And I really do, our interests that have really often been overshadowed in legislative debates, for sure. I think recent years have brought a wave of new laws on admission timelines, cooling requirements, building compliance that directly affect us. And these mandates quite often are passed without meaningful consultation, at least none that I know of, from the people who must implement and pay for them, us. And so I really do believe that co-op and condo interests, and I think also this is on the state level as well. I think co-op and condo interests are often not fully considered in New York City legislation because lawmakers tend to focus on rental housing, climate mandates, tenant protection policies, all very important and worthwhile, of course. But then the unique financial and governance structures of co-ops and condos receive far less attention. And I believe the result is that many laws are written with large landlords or rental buildings in mind, even though the co-ops and condos face very different constraints, let's say. And we get swept into legislative language that is not exactly applicable. So I think first you have to have representation at the state and city level that grasps these issues. And I have been a renter and I have been a co-op partner. So I have lived both sides. And I actually think CNYC is a terrific resource, and I believe in untapped political power. We have a real voting block here, and I think it should be mobilized. So I think we just really need a person that understands these issues and can listen to the concerns to bring to the table.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. Layla.
Yeah, as the president of my co-op for the past 24 years, pretty much since its inception, I am intimately aware of the impact of local laws on our properties. And, I concur with what has been said already. I think that, there's not enough input, there's not enough of a seat at the table by condos and co-ops. And I think this is something that really needs to change. I think that, we all have at heart safety. We want our buildings to be safe, our elevators and cooling towers to be safe, our gas stoves to be safe. No one is disputing that, but I think that it is really important that the laws are passed in a way that keeps co-ops and condos in mind, brings their voices to the table. I think that the one size fits all is a little bit of a problem, and I would say that when those laws are passed, there is no evaluation of the financial impact it is going to have on co-ops and condos. And this is something that I would really work on to make sure that, before a law is passed, some financial evaluation is made to understand the cost to the co-ops and condos, before it is implemented. I would also push for more education. Very often we will be faced with a law to which we have to react. The most recent was the gas detectors, which once again, is a good measure, but there was very little information provided to co-ops and condos, and a shortage of the units themselves that place the number of properties in a difficult situation.
Great. Thanks, Layla. Lindsey?
So just a little overview. I worked for the state and I was the housing secretary. So I think a lot of that experience overseeing HDFCs, permanent affordability, getting hundreds of millions of dollars for underfunded public housing. And that context is incredibly important because a lot of the onerous things that you're dealing with are both at the city and at the state level, and having that deep experience is useful. I also come to the table with the mayor's endorsement, which I think is incredibly important here because that goes along with a lot of the agencies and individuals and leaders that will be brought to bear trying to approach the challenges that we have in co-ops and condos. And I think when I look at the scorecard from previous years, there's a lot of opportunity to work together on streamlining regulations, to take back and to shift onerous reporting structures that are not adding anything to, preserving affordability and reinforcing fair housing. I think there's a lot of work that we can do together. I also think I'm hearing a lot of fear around the implementation of Local Law 97, and I think it's incredibly important that we move forward with it. But I think there are a lot of opportunities, not just working with, the Green Building Council. There are a lot of different ways that we can approach ensuring that that is not onerously harming condos and co-ops. So many times candidates, when they come to you, they have these kitchen cabinets that help them think through policy and how they're going to form it in an election race. And I'm hoping to have you by my side as a kitchen cabinet when elected, because there's a lot that we can work on together. There's a lot that we can move forward on. And as I look at the scorecard, I think there's a lot of good work to be done, frankly, and I'm excited to work together.
Thank you, Lindsey. We're on to question 2. And almost every co-op and condo in District 3 has an economically diverse population of homeowners. In my co-op, which is a 138-unit co-op building, for example, we've got first-time homeowners, some with young families. We have professionals at the top of their career, and we have a considerable number of seniors living on limited incomes and, frankly, just getting by. It's this last category, the seniors living on limited incomes and just getting by. Do you have any ideas for programs, incentives, funding, or changes to existing exemptions that could enable more vulnerable co-op and condo homeowners to afford to stay in their homes? All the current proposed solutions, like the new J51 bill, are focused on buildings based on their assessed value rather than on the needs of long-term homeowners who may struggle to pay their share of common charges regardless of the presumed value of their apartments. And then there was a second question, which you may not or may not care to answer. And I know the answer for at least 2 of you is: have you ever lived in a co-op, and what's your experience? So, but the first one is the more important one. What are we going to do about what can be done about helping people afford to stay in their apartments? Goes to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Trevor. So I want to start off by saying, well, yes, I obviously live in a co-op and on the board, as I said a few times. But I want to talk about what I think is the biggest misconception about co-ops. I think co-op and condo owners are often perceived incorrectly as uniformly affluent. I think many policymakers assume co-op and condo residents are wealthy, especially here in New York City, even though thousands and thousands and thousands of units are middle income or limited equity. And I think this misconception can lead lawmakers to prioritize tenant protections over owner-occupied housing concerns. And I don't think it's, here or there, one or the other. And that's understandable. But we also have to educate voices to relay real concerns of co-op and condo tenants. And I'll give you one example. I live in Hell's Kitchen, and it's close to Broadway. So we have a big theater population in our co-op. And there is a lady, and her name is Lori. And she actually owned a business that gave and supplied Broadway with undergarments. It was a very unique little business, and she had it out of her co-op. I remember the day she lived across the hall from me. I remembered the day she had to move out because she could not afford the maintenance anymore, and she had to leave. And she was exactly the type of people we want to keep here in our district and as Hell's Kitchen. And I just think that's a misconception. And I think as an elected official, that has to be at the forefront of saving these units. And I know a lot of our sponsor-owned units that are switching over. But so yes, it's just knowing that education.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. We're then going to go to Layla, followed by Lindsey, followed by Carl. So Layla.
Thank you, Trevor. It is incredibly challenging for people who are on fixed income to continue to live in their homes. And, I think that we all go through this dance of appealing our property taxes, getting them slightly reduced, which is not a reduction of the taxes, it's just a reduction of the increase. And having to account for the increase in the cost of maintenance, whether it is insurance or utilities. I think that for people who are in the workforce and whose income may be tracking somewhat with the increase of the common charges and the property taxes, it may be a little bit more manageable. For people who are on fixed income and who are seniors and who are retired, it becomes incredibly challenging. So I think that exploring the possibility of a tax abatement or a tax reduction or an exemption for people who are on fixed income is something that would be incredibly helpful. And this is something that would not be so onerous and structured well, could really provide this level of stability and support that would allow seniors to continue to age in place. Otherwise, we have this hemorrhage of seniors who are not able to stay in their homes and end up having to leave, and which is really not desirable at all.
Great. Thanks very much, Layla. Carl.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll answer the second part first. I am a renter, but I hope to be a co-op owner one day. It is really one of the only realistic paths into homeownership for a public servant. Totally understand the importance of maintaining that access to homeownership and affordability. And look, co-op owners are being squeezed from a lot of different directions right now. And if we're really not careful, we risk losing that pathway. But I think we have to reduce the cumulative regulatory burden. Buildings are dealing with dozens of requirements, and even rules that are well-intentioned, they can end up to higher maintenance and special assessments. And so I think we need to streamline the compliance. We need to cut down the duplicate requirements, make sure the law is evaluated for its real cost on residents. And we need to improve how the city implements these policies by working closely with the agents and co-op boards and groups like the council, so that we can do our best to reduce the indirect drivers of costs that are plaguing a lot of co-op and condo owners. So it's about stability. It's about being consistent, and we have to make sure that co-op owners continue to be able to invest in their communities so that they can stay here. And our job is to make a system that works for them, is not against them, and has a system that is not punitive.
Thanks very much, Carl. Lindsey, you're
So I live in a condo and we're renters. I have been an owner's rep at various points, so I understand the system a bit, but I would love to learn more, and I hope to one day, like Carl, live in a co-op. I think I'm hearing a lot. I've knocked almost 3,000 doors in the district myself, and I am hearing from a lot of seniors who are barely able to stay in their apartments. And I think we need to expand the SCHE program, which is, I think, the only affordability program, assistance program for homeowners and seniors. The delta between what people can get in terms of assistance, even within that program, is somewhere between 5% and 20%. That's a big delta. So I think we need to expand it. We need to make sure folks are aware of the program. I'm also hearing a lot from seniors about the utility costs. I've got the endorsement of the Sunrise Movement. We have been organizing, even at the state level, to push the PSC, the Public Service Commission, to freeze and push back on the Con Ed rate hikes. These are a huge burden on people, so we need to get the utility costs in check. And then I think we need to do property tax reform and ensure that there's tax fairness for co-ops within that. And so those are some of the things I'm hearing about. And I'm hearing some real horror stories of people having to make choices about, food buying and having to go to food pantries, or, I've volunteered for years, and it's all seniors. And some of those people are co-op property owners, and it's just abysmal. So I think a combination of all of those things we need to pursue.
okay. Thanks very much, Lindsey. We'll move on to question 3. And the topic really is governance, and the order of answering will be Layla, Lindsey, Carl, and Leslie. Co-ops and condos are run by unpaid volunteer board members who, like me and like a couple of you, are elected by their fellow homeowners. We try to do our best make sure that our buildings are run to provide a good quality of life at an affordable price for our owners. The problem we face is that regulation and legislation often interfere unnecessarily with corporate governance, adding to individual liability and responsibility of board members, and, by the way, making it less attractive to serve on a board. As an example, a reintroduced bill from the last council session would impose potential criminal liability on board co-op members who review purchase applications. The bill sponsors have said that this legislation is intended to address discrimination in co-op sales. However, data cited by the city identifies only one possible discrimination case in the past 10 years. What would you do to ensure that legislation is based on solid evidence rather than perception? So, Layla.
Yes, totally agree with the spirit of the question. As the president of the condo in my building, I feel the burden of this liability and this responsibility, and I think that legislating is something that is always a delicate affair. And I think that when it comes to the way legislation is passed, we tend to do a little bit too much of a one size fits all that ends up having direct consequences that are probably not intended. I think we will all agree that discrimination is something that we are profoundly opposed to. And at the same time, the vast majority of co-op and condo buildings in the district and probably throughout the city don't practice discrimination. Likewise, there's a number of laws that are one size fits all. We all want to have, safe cooling towers. The case of Legionnaire disease are actually fairly minimal, and yet, the imposition on the treatment of our cooling systems is incredibly onerous. So I think that there ought to be a little bit more of a careful, tailored approach to legislation so that we don't end up with the burden of liability or cost to co-ops and condos in situations where the case actually is not really relevant to the properties that it intends to legislate.
Carl.
I agree a lot with what Layla said. There is we can have the most well-intentioned of bills that can have the worst unintended consequences. And we certainly don't want to be subjecting volunteers on co-op boards to criminal liability. We don't, that's not a good way to legislate. I really do think this is about working to help solidify some political power among the co-op and condo community so that they, and like I said earlier, they would be at the table, being part of the legislative conversation early in the process so that there are real conversations about how the real life effects of legislation will work. So, we've got to work together on that. We can do it. We can prevent discrimination and also keep folks from being criminally charged. It's a balance. There needs to be precision in the legislating, and folks need to be at the table to help steer the conversations. And as council member, that's what I would do. I would be an advocate and a partner and have you there with me.
Thanks, Carl. Leslie.
Sorry, I'm just unmuting. So your question hits on something very important, that we are volunteers, right? I am not for this bill mainly because the way it's written doesn't seem to understand how co-ops function or the burden on volunteer boards. I think what lawmakers have to understand, this is what I was talking about earlier, of having our voices at the table, is that New York City co-ops already operate under extensive legal protections, especially around discrimination and fair housing. They operate under New York City human rights laws requirements, Local Law 24, the Fair Chance Housing Act, the Federal Fair Housing Act. All of these are already in place when these boards do interviews and look for new shareholders and new applicants, right? So I think the new admissions timing bill does not replace these protections. It just simply adds new procedural requirements on top of I believe, an already complex legal landscape. And I think the strict deadlines for acknowledging applications, determining completeness, issuing decisions are just unrealistic for buildings that lack full-time administrative staff. This one-size-fits-all system, I think, is wrong because co-ops buildings, they vary widely in size, staffing, and governance. I mean, smaller co-ops in particular are getting treated here the same as large, professionally managed properties, despite having far fewer resources. So, and I also think I would like to say that I think actually this law increases legal exposure, and missed deadlines can trigger complaints and penalties. So I think you know where I would stand on that. I just think it's more of an education.
Thanks, Leslie. Layla.
I think I certainly
Okay. Okay,
question.
great. When I was the housing secretary for the state, I certainly pushed forth several fair housing laws for implementation. We fought for source of income, against source of income discrimination. So in principle, I'm very much for the goal of this. And I think the goal is in part to remove some of the opacity of the system, make sure people understand what the review process is. But as I was looking at, for example, the legislation you mentioned, a 15-day period to be responsive is very little time for a volunteer board. And then a 45-day decision period. I am not a co-op board member, but even I see the difficulty in that, and increasing the level of exposure for volunteer group. I think we need to maintain the goals, but there's every reason to reassess how we're approaching that. There's no reason we need to move away from shining a light on the process, ensuring that we have fair housing laws and processes and procedures that enable that, but not making it actually perverse incentives to not actually even do this important work. And I think it has that impact in some sense. And I would be excited to work together on figuring out how to make legislation like this work.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 4 has to do with mainly with cost of implementation. Lindsey, followed by Carl, followed by Leslie, followed by Layla. The question is this: regulatory requirements and compliance mandates such as Local Law 97, the Climate Mobilization Act, and Local Law 152, which governs gas repairs and replacement, among many others, have increased the financial pressure on co-op and condo homeowners who've got to pay for all this. At the current time, costs of implementation are not adequately considered during the development of legislation and regulations. What is your view on taking implementation costs into account as rules and legislation are developed, instead of reacting to objections that the co-op community is forced to raise, co-op and condo community is forced to raise after the fact? And how would you act on your views? Lindsey.
Sure. Well, I do very much support Local Law 97 and the spirit of that. I understand, I'm hearing pretty regularly from co-op and condo owners that there's a lot of fear about the cost that this is going to and how this is going to impact people. And I absolutely think bringing you to the table early on in legislative drafting is the only way to avoid this. I also think, having spoken with friends at the Green Building Council, moving forward, there are ways to work around some of the challenges, incentivize replacement, focus on deeply affordable housing and who this hits, who it doesn't. I think now that we have this legislation, we need to figure out how to make it work for people and ensure that at the same time that we're meeting these climate goals, we're not taking away affordability and affordable communities, particularly for seniors and more vulnerable folks. So I would approach legislation moving forward at the drafting stage with you to make sure that I'm understanding how each piece impacts and if there are better ways to approach these things. And I think now that we have Local Law 97 and it's about implementation in the next phase of the 2030 planning, it's about how do we figure out how to provide the support that is necessary to ensure that affordability is not lost. And I'm hearing it every day. So I would say it's a top 10 issue. So I know it's a big deal. I'm hearing it everywhere.
Thanks, Lindsey. Carl.
So, I hear a lot from the co-op and condo community that one of the biggest issues is the disruption of their long-term capital plans and how these compliance can lead directly to special assessments and higher maintenance costs, which of course threatens affordability. And specifically with Local Law 97, I also do share the goal of the bill and support it, but the current the current structure can create some real financial shock for buildings. So we should be looking at how ways that we can make that work. Considering things like end of life compliance timelines, so buildings aren't forced into premature system replacements, or doing things like expanding hardship provisions for cost burden buildings. That there could be proportional penalties, especially for things like late filings, but the goal should be actual emissions reduction and not forcing buildings into costly decisions that are going to destabilize them. So I believe that things have to be that the implementation of this bill should be partnership not punishment. And we have to be willing to work and have some flexibilities around on timelines and really think carefully about how we're going to be enforcing the implementation so it doesn't hurt our affordable housing stock.
Thank you, Carl. Leslie?
Yes, thank you. So, New York City co-ops face some of the heaviest regulatory burdens of any residential housing type in the city. And I think that is largely due to a growing list of local laws. Local Law 97 is now at the top of that list. I am very much in favor of Local Law 97, and I do not wish to weaken it. But we have to acknowledge the financial impact is enormous. Many buildings invest or must invest hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, really, in upgrades such as new windows, HVAC replacements, insulation, or face big fines, right? So I think older pre-war co-ops like my building are hardest hit because they rely on outdated systems and then they face these steep retrofit challenges, and I know that very well. But I think part of the problem here is that green technologies, eco-friendly design in general is not prioritized, and it's just recently being subsidized. And I believe this infrastructure and much of the cost should be taken care of by the state or federally, and that can be done in many ways. It could be done through grants. It could be done through tax credits. It could be done through low interest financing. It could be done through compliance pathways for co-ops, streamlining compliance, because our goal really is to make the city cleaner and greener, not place financial hardships on residents that are already getting priced out of the city. So I've said this time and time again, and I'm making in the environment a very high platform plank in my campaign. And we have to make serious public investment in our city's green infrastructure, and that means helping out our co-ops and condos.
Thanks very much. Layla?
Yeah, listen, very clearly, Local Law 97 is going to have a major financial impact on co-ops and condos. And, the law is intended for something that is very critical and very important. Reducing greenhouse gas emission is really critical. And in order to do that, in order to, enter this transition, the burden cannot be placed, singularly on co-ops and condos. It will not work. We have to be realistic. It will not work. So we really need to work urgently on putting together a series of grants. I think that the idea of a tax abatement is also a good idea in order to facilitate the energy transition. A new boiler, retrofitting a building to be 100% electric, replacing windows, replacing HVAC systems is going to be a huge burden. I think that the path. I'm sorry. The path is grants from the state. The state has done it already and needs to, re-up these large grants. I think that grants that are apportioned from the federal government are going to be essential. And I look forward to working with our federal partners. And I think that we're going to have to create an office of the city of New York to help co-ops and condos navigate this complicated system. One thing I will add is that I do not support tax credits. I think tax credits are going to be a huge cause of actually impoverishing certain co-ops and condos, which I think is very problematic.
Thank you, Layla. We'll move on to question 5, which we will go in the order of Carl, Leslie, Layla, and Lindsey. This question stays with the compliance issue. Co-ops and condos are currently, according to CNYC, subject to over 80 local laws across many city agencies, making compliance difficult, costly, time-consuming, and stressful, as well as significantly increasing the likelihood that buildings are fined for non-compliance and violations. What actions would you take to streamline existing administrative inspection and filing compliance requirements? How would you review and seek the input of the co-op condo community to propose legislation that would add to the existing burden? Carl.
Well, Yeah, right now the co-op boards are navigating, as you pointed out, a very long list of different regulatory requirements, which, as mentioned earlier, in many cases are well intended, but again are missing the real world practicality of them. And we don't want to be in a scenario where suddenly it's death by a thousand cuts of regulatory fines and requirements. So, look, these are volunteers managing incredibly complex responsibilities, and the system is unstable. And so we need to streamline compliance. We have to reduce the duplicativity and unnecessary rules. So I will push for clearer guidance and better coordination across our city agencies so that the boards are not left guessing. And we also need to be thoughtful about new legislation that could increase liability exposure, and especially when boards are acting in good faith. Oversight matters, but it has to be balanced with the real capacity of the people doing the work. So, as I think we've all stated, that's going to require partnership and having you at the table and bringing you in early in the process.
Thank you, Carl. Leslie.
Yeah, I think Carl is absolutely correct with death by a thousand cuts for co-ops, for sure, for certain. I think streamlining compliance starts with centralizing information and planning ahead, which I know sometimes is tough for co-ops, but I think it's important. I'll give you an example. So now, in an attempt to rid New York City of the plague of scaffolding, no one here likes scaffolding, right? New parameters will, again, financially burden shareholders. And I think this is an unintended consequence. We as shareholders and our buildings, we have zero profit incentive or model, right? We just try and pay the bills. So new scaffoldings and the recertification by professional engineers are going to have every 90 days, and that's new. So that is a lot of extra cost for a building that you don't realize when you enact one of these laws. It's just another small, which becomes a big fee. Right? I mean, I understand rental and commercial landlords really aren't going to get, don't care that much, but shareholders, we don't want scaffolding. We don't have we have a great incentive to speed up that process. But we're going to get hit with another cost. So I think we need digital tools for energy tracking and documenting management. I think that can reduce administrative chaos for sure. I think clear delegation, assigning maybe specific board members, committees, oversee compliance areas, just to see. I know in my experience that we prevent tasks from falling through the cracks. So in short, I really don't think co-ops can totally eliminate regulatory burdens, but they can make it far more manageable and by planning proactively, and that I can help address that just by knowing what is coming and being proactive coming down the pike.
Layla.
Yeah, local laws are a huge burden on co-ops and condos. Once again, I think that, all co-ops and condos are, fully committed to safety of their own residents as well as, the greater public that may be walking by the buildings. I think that it is about time that we create a system in the city legislature and the city council that will actually assess the cost of those local laws. I think that would be immensely helpful for co-ops and condos to have more legibility and visibility and predictability on what these laws are going to bring. The other thing that I will say is that right now the framework is really a punishing framework. Co-ops and condos are hit with fines if we don't comply. To take one example, the largest landlord in New York City is New York City, and it's NYCHA. And NYCHA is actually not exempt from Local Law 11. They are subject to it. But if they don't do the repairs, they don't get fined. So, there is a discrepancy in the way the laws are implemented. And I think that, taking this punishing approach may be valid when you're dealing with a slumlord, but the vast majority of co-ops and condos are quite the opposite. We deeply care for our properties, and I would really shy away from this punitive approach.
Thanks, Layla. Lindsey, you have the last word.
This conversation is very helpful because it's very clear that the burdensome regulation and the process of engaging co-op and condo owners has really been absent writ large in the city. And it's kind of an oddity to me because so much of the goal of a middle class lifestyle for the last century or so has been around homeownership. And I think increasingly in my generation and younger, that path is completely lost conceptually, and we need to help it return. I think in an ideal world, we need really a SWAT team, so to speak, probably at HPD. I worked with Dina Levy, who's the head of it, when I was overseeing housing for the whole state, including HCR. I think we need someone kind of akin to, or a group kind of akin to small business services that works with small businesses, works with the bids in the city within HPD, that is focused on and advocating for the specific concerns of condos and co-ops and the people who live in them and the community served by them. Because not only is it hard, especially for seniors, to stay in their homes that they have bought because of the fixed income, it's incredibly hard for the next generation to do so. And I think, frankly, it pairs very well with the current administration's focus on affordability. So I think just as we're talking, that is a real opportunity there. And, having the endorsement of the mayor, I think, is going to be incredibly important and helpful to kind of push for these kinds of things at the agency level in partnership with city council. So that's just one idea I think we could move on.
Thank you very much, Lindsey. This gets us on to question 6, and the order that we're going to tackle that is Leslie, Layla, Lindsey, and followed up by Carl. This gets to the landlord-tenant relationship. Legislation intended to protect tenants from landlords is often drafted in such a way that it mistakenly includes co-ops and condos, negatively impacting them and interfering with their governance. This forces us to advocate for exemptions after the fact. How could you help City Council recognize that the relationship of co-ops and condos to their shareholders and homeowners is not a traditional landlord-tenant relationship? As co-op and condo owners, we both own the building and reside in its apartments, as opposed to residing in the building owned by a separate landlord. Leslie.
This is the loophole that every single piece of almost every housing legislation that affects especially co-ops, we see it all the time, right? And we always have to go back to our, usually with the state senator or state assembly, and say, listen, it's a different relationship. It's a technicality for us, isn't it? Right? Yes, through the proprietary lease, there is technically a landlord tenant relationship, and that's what the law or laws see. But we are not a typical landlord, right? We're not a landlord. So it's collective ownership. And going way back to what we talked about, this is where representation matters, right? And to understand that we have to not close those loopholes after the fact, but it has to be baked into the legislation, right? Collective ownership is a great, great model. It takes the profit right out of it. So, and I think when a lot of these, the housing legislation is made, and well-intentioned, like you said, for sure, it's thinking about that profit model, right? Landlord getting, having a building, owning a building, and getting from a tenant, raising rents, that type of thing. We don't have that profit model as co-op owners. We don't. It's, like I said, we're just baselining the budget to maintain living expenses. So I think that is a very important distinction. I'm glad you brought it up, and we have to be proactive on it instead of closing loopholes afterwards.
Thanks very much. Layla.
Yeah, no, listen, I think that, tenant laws and tenant regulations are incredibly critical. I think that, protection of tenants is essential, and, we have come a long way. At the same time, as Leslie just said, this relationship is, for co-ops is different. And I think that, it is really important to recognize that and to make sure that we provide for those types of relationships to be more mindful of the fact that it is not at risk of discrimination or poor practices as a traditional landlord-tenant relationship might be when the building is fully owned by the same entity or individual. So I think that providing this nuance once again is something that is really important and that ought to be kept in mind.
Thanks, Layla. Lindsey.
Sorry, my mute couldn't get off. I think it's a very valid point, and I would just go back to the last comment I was making about how few people are thinking about pathways to home ownership, and how little a part of that conversation is at, I think, the city council level or even at the citywide level, because I think it's incredibly important, and it's one of the few pathways to middle class lifestyle in the city, and I think it deserves its own attention, and it's so little understood, and I think that's why it's oftentimes lumped into this broader problem. And so I would work very much together. I would also go back to what we just discussed about the idea of really highlighting and having specific people of responsibility at HPD to work on this, and then addressing it at city council and hearings, and ensuring that you're there and that we're able to kind of walk through the specific concerns and the way that co-ops and condos are getting wrapped up into problems that are not that they're usually on the receiving end of.
Thanks, Lindsey. Carl.
Yeah, co-ops are a different model than a regular tenant landlord relationship. I don't have to tell folks on this call that. So we need to have precision and clear distinctions in legislation. So in laws that are designed for for-profit landlords don't always translate to co-ops. So when the costs go up, they fall directly on the residents through maintenance or assessments. So that's a fundamentally different dynamic, and the policies need to reflect that. There needs to be more of a focus on education and engagement in the council. Many policymakers don't fully understand that co-op boards are made up of residents managing shared finances and really just making decisions about how to recover costs in the building. So there is, I think, at the council right now, I believe that there's talk of putting together a condo and co-op caucus. I think that would be a really important step in helping further the education and engagement on this issue. And there needs to be voices in the council that just make it clear that it's a different form of home ownership. And we need to be pushing to maintain that affordability model and design smarter policies that support residents instead of unintentionally driving up their costs.
Thanks, Carl. That brings us to question 7, which is mostly financial. And the order in which we'll take this is Layla, Lindsey, Carl, and then Leslie. In District 3, co-op and condo homeowners are not necessarily deep-pocketed New Yorkers who can afford to contribute more than their fair share of the city's real estate tax revenue. For co-ops and condos, real estate taxes comprise, on average, almost 50% of their total expenditure. Raising real estate taxes by 10%, as has been recently proposed, would immediately raise housing costs by about 5% for all 36,000 co-op and condo homeowners in District 3. This would be extremely burdensome for many owners. As a city council member, what would your priorities be in weighing the impact on co-op and condo homeowners of taxes? More generally, what other avenues would you consider for presenting a balanced budget in the council?
Yes, thank you, Trevor. So, property taxes in New York City are basically reverse engineered. I think that most of you know that. We basically figure out how much money we need, and then we figure out how we're going to assess properties. I think that, as you pointed out, co-ops and condos don't actually have the strength, the financial strength, to withhold large increase. I think that it is really important to work with our state partners to make sure that we provide stability and predictability on the tax assessment of co-ops and condos. What I will say, though, is that there are a number of real estate properties in New York, including in District 3, that do not pay their fair share. And as much as I love a good basketball game, Madison Square Garden does not pay property taxes. Hudson Yards is deeply tax abated. And I think that this is a huge disservice, because the reality is that, the tax base and the tax revenue that is needed remains the same. And if someone is not doing their fair share, it means that somebody else is picking up the slack. So I think I would work very, very hard, once again, with my state counterparts, because, a lot of our state assessment comes from, tax assessment comes from state formula, to make sure that, the burden is not unjustifiably and unnecessarily put on co-ops and condos, preserving this, as much as possible, the affordability and the predictability. I think this is really very important.
Thanks, Layla. Lindsey.
I would absolutely fight for property tax reform, and agree with Layla on the predictability aspect. I worked at state, as I mentioned earlier. I oversaw the housing portfolio. I worked with this current governor and had the endorsement of many state senators and state assembly members. And so this is well-traveled field for me. I think we do need to instead, as we do property tax reform, and keeping in mind our condo and co-op community and essential to that, think about and push forward for tax the rich, the 2% personal income above people making $1 million or more, as well as the business tax. I was both the housing and job secretary, and other states have done this on taxing our wealthiest, and people have not left. And so I think we need to offer alternatives. I also agree, and even on our website from the beginning have listed MSG's tax, lack of paying taxes should be gone. There's really no reason for it. And we need to make those changes. And I will fight at the state level, where I spent many years working, and with the partners that I worked with regularly, and in the budget process that I oversaw.
Thanks, Lindsey. Carl?
So yes, definitely need property tax reform. The system is widely seen as inequitable and outdated. So, but when we do that, we need to make sure we're pushing back against broad changes that continue to shift more burden onto co-op and condo owners, especially working and middle class residents. I think we have to be holistic, and it has to be carefully structured, as has been mentioned, working with our state partners, because there have been past proposals under previous mayors that I know would have really negatively impacted this community. So we need targeted solutions so we avoid unintended consequences. And in terms of the budget gap, Lindsey is right that we should be looking at some progressive revenue streams from Albany as well, asking the wealthiest New Yorkers to pay a little bit more on things like capital gains or taxes on corporations. I also think we need to look at how our agencies are spending money efficiently, and more ways that the city can grow its job sector. So we're filling gaps in the long term. But at the core, the reform needs to work at protecting affordability and keeping homeownership within reach.
Thanks, Carl. Leslie?
Yes, so I think we all know, I don't know if your co-op and condos like mine, but our main costs are just three things: insurance, staff, and property tax. And when I heard the mayor float his idea to raise property taxes, my first reaction was the wicked blow it would serve longstanding co-ops, for sure. And I think he's pulled back a little on this after many of the council members have, shown him that would be very disadvantaged to homeowners. We are not a profit model. Any increase in cost transfers right over to the tenant, and we are not in the business of making money, and it just raises the cost of living for all of us. And recently, I don't, you guys probably know this, but when you look at your units being sold, right? It's looked at comps. And these comps are now being very much affected by a lot of these bigger, newer buildings that are raising our comps. So if there's a big sky high tower 2 blocks away, then those comps are heavily weighed with the property tax cost in mind. So now a 60 unit pre-war co-op property tax is shooting skyward because of those new builds. So this is resulting in long-term residents getting pushed out, and this is happening at high rates. The pied-à-terre tax, I'm a fan of, because I think this is, instead of identifying a building or a property, it's identifying specific units and individuals in those units who are either international buyers or, wealthier buyers. So it's taxing that individual unit and not the building in general, which I think would be very advantageous to co-ops.
Thanks very much, Leslie. That brings us to the last question, which is a quality of life question. And we're going to go in the order of Lindsey, Carl, Leslie, and Layla. Issues raised by District 3 homeowners include empty stores, empty storefronts, e-bike safety and the location of bike lanes, the safety of Washington Square, and the damage and diminished quality of life that can result from new construction and major infrastructure projects. How can we learn about things happening on our block and our neighborhood early in the process, and who can we turn to for help ensuring they have input into the process and that our homes are protected? Now the charter revisions have passed, how would you ensure homeowners are consulted, and how would you protect homeowners from unintended negative consequences? And as an add-on, what would be your first priority to improve the quality of life in our district? And we go first to Lindsey.
So this is right up my alley as a career urban planner and someone who's spent almost a decade managing bids in the city, business improvement districts within this district. I kind of think about the job of the city council member in part to be your partner, local manager of everything that happens. And I think what I'm hearing is that we need to do a better job in terms of connecting with co-op and condos homeowners in this way. And I think specifically something that I've supported is the small business rent stabilization. It's a piece of state legislation. I'm hearing a lot about empty storefronts for stores, and we already small commercial spaces. We already have an equivalent of that that works very well in residential. It's time that we did it for our small businesses that are struggling to stay in business as well. They are our eyes and ears on the street, in addition to being, a central part of our community. I have the endorsement of both of the leaders of the carriers of that bill in the state Senate and Assembly side. I'm a big fan of district planning, and so I think we need to approach regular master planning and district planning and conversations. And as I mentioned earlier, there's so much that goes into a campaign to bring people in who are experts, but we need to make sure that we're doing it after election. And so I'm hoping to have, ongoing and regular meetings with CNYC. And I think that it's incredibly important that connecting regularly and also including our bids in that. We have a number of flourishing bids in this district. They are partners alongside agencies in the city, as well as city council. And I think they're an important part of the ingredient as well in being our partners, as well as block associations.
Thanks, Lindsey. Carl?
So managing our shared and public space is a really important role of the city councilman or council member. And I also worked at a bid in between working at the council. I think Lindsey and I have great affinity for bids and what they're able to do in terms of helping lift up quality of life. So I would like to look to expand them where we can. I've engaged in an expansion of the bid that I'd like to get over the finish line for Hudson Yards and Hell's Kitchen. I think there are opportunities to expand in other places like the West Village and around Flatiron. So we need to, that's a great tool to ensure our streets, sidewalks, and parks are clean, safe, and well managed. We need to have strong coordination between agencies like sanitation, parks, and DOT. So when issues come up, they're addressed quickly. I've spent my career twisting the arms of agencies to get them to respond. And it's part of having a robust constituent service operation in your district, which we really prided ourselves on in Councilmember Bottcher's office. So we also need to work closely with the community boards and other local organizations so that we're having robust community conversations about future design changes and everyone's included in the conversation. Because we have the best outcomes when everybody's working together, the city and residents, So my role is to make sure that partnership is real, that it's responsive, and that it delivers so that people can see the improvements on their blocks.
Thanks, Carl. Leslie?
So I have two immediate recommendations. So you were saying that to know what's going on. The first is the community board. You should look up your community board. They deal with every issue, whether that is a street sign or whether that is a social service provider placement or whether that's dealing with e-bikes or empty storefronts. Your community board deals with it. I am the chair of Community Board 4. I deal with all of these issues from huge developments like the Port Authority bus terminal redevelopment program to smaller things like where are we going to cut a curb so we can get, access, wheelchair access. So that's the first thing. The second thing would be precinct community councils. So if you go to your NYPD precinct, they are the only city agency that has public meetings every single month, and it's open to the public. You could ask any questions. You mentioned e-bikes, Trevor. That is a huge, huge issue, not only on our campaign trail, but at these community precinct meetings. And I am very proud that I have the endorsement of the co-founder of EVSA, which is the Electric Vehicle Safety Alliance, which is trying to coordinate e-vehicle safety with regular pedestrians and other, traffic, spokes in our urban landscape. But that's what I would start with. I would start with community boards. I would start with precincts. And since I am on both, I would be a very, very receptive council member, and my door would always be open.
Thanks, Leslie. Layla.
Yes, thank you for this question, Trevor. I think that we're all feeling, the degraded quality of life in our communities, whether it is the West Village, Chelsea, or Hell's Kitchen. We have grown accustomed to accepting conditions that, quite frankly, should not really be acceptable. Whether it is pedestrian safety, being witness to open drug use, other quality of life issues around, lack of garbage pickup. I think that it is about time that we recommit to, really providing city services. This is the contract, right? This is what the council member ought to do. This is what the city ought to provide to its residents. I think it is really important to acknowledge that, maybe the city has not provided as best as it should. And as a council member, I will fiercely work to make sure that we do provide the type of city services that are needed, that the garbage is picked up, that when you call 311 because there's a garbage pail at the corner of your block, the response is not to remove the garbage pail, but actually to come and pick it up more frequently. That we do a little bit more enforcement for e-bags, that we do education campaigns, so that, we're not at risk, especially our seniors, especially people with disabilities, when they're using our sidewalks. I think we need to just, up the ante a little bit, to make sure that we provide this quality of life, while also being respectful of, civil liberties and, continuing to, to making sure that, our population is not, the subject of unnecessary enforcement. But I think that, right now we're not striking the right balance, and the city ought to do a better job.
Thank you. Thank you, Layla. That brings us to the end of our questions, and thank you so much. I think your answers have been extremely informative, and thank you very much for those. We now get on to, you each have an opportunity to make a closing statement. You have 2 minutes, and we're going to go in reverse order from the opening statements. So Layla, it's you, and followed by Leslie, followed by Carl, and then followed by Lindsey. Layla.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss these really important and critical issues as they pertain to co-ops and condos. I think that they are, the really intrinsic part of the fabric of District 3, and providing the legislative and budgetary framework to really support these kinds of properties and those who occupy them is going to be critical. As someone who has lived in a condo most of her life in New York City, and who has had her sleeve rolled up, being the president of my condo for over 2 decades. I intimately understand what the issues are, and I am well prepared to tackle the challenges, making sure that, whether it is access to additional grants, supporting tax credits, making sure that, the tax system is fair, and making sure that our local laws are not overburdening co-ops and condos while providing the safety that, once again, we all agree is non-negotiable, is something that I am prepared to do. And I look forward to being in office to represent your interests, because your interests are the interests of District 3. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Layla. Leslie?
Yeah, so co-ops and our needs are often either overlooked or caught up in legislation technicalities. And I believe you would want a council member that would not only help close those loopholes, but know how to advocate in the first place for these buildings, because that baseline knowledge that I have is important. It's institutional knowledge that you go to City Hall with. And I'm not sure if you've done a lot of these candidate forums before, but even this is very, very important. And I would urge you guys to continue this, because it makes all of us candidates look up all the stuff, and it makes us learn more about the issues. And that's important. And you should keep doing. There's other races I can tell you about after the Zoom that you should maybe connect with to do the same thing, because it's just that engagement that makes electeds or people running for office understand better. So I come here with a strong reputation of working well with others, regardless of whether they agree with me or not. And I think the bulk of being a successful council member is having the ability to listen, to productively process information, and then collectively find a better path forward and to build coalitions. That's really important. And I've never used a single step to build a pathway to elective office. My service to my community grew organically, again, starting on my block association and my co-op board. So if you know me, as some of your viewership does, I'm receptive, responsive, and super hardworking. And I think that's why the bulk of the community, the block associations and tenants leaders from Hell's Kitchen through Chelsea and into West Village have endorsed me. But I would be honored to earn your vote for City Council, and I look forward to working together at City Hall.
Thanks so much, Leslie. Carl?
Yeah, I just want to echo all of the thank yous for what I think is a really important conversation around what comes down to one core issue, which is affordability, right? And co-ops and condos are a really important piece of that. As has been said, they're the last real pathway to stable middle-class homeownership in New York City. And if we don't protect that, we risk becoming a city where fewer and fewer people can afford to stay. I moved to New York City with not a whole lot. I was 18. I moved here essentially by myself, and I was able to build a life here. And at the time, access to housing that I could afford was a big part of that, and that is slipping away from us. And we need to fight so that the 18-year-old can move here, but also the person that was born here can stay in the community that they grew up in. So I've spent the last decade working for this community, helping navigate city agencies, delivering resources, and making sure that people are heard, using the mechanisms of government to deliver real results. I know how government works, and more importantly, I know how to make it work for you. So I want the co-op and condo community at the table with me, and I'm ready to get to work on this on day one. I'm going to leverage my relationships that I have built across my career in the council to make sure that you're included, that you're heard, and I will be a strong advocate. I will fight to reduce unnecessary burdens. I will ensure you're at the table and protect the affordability that makes these homes possible, because this is, whether or not we're going to live in New York City, that remains a place where people can build a life. So I'm eager to get to work with you, and I hope everybody turns out and votes by April 28th.
Thank you, Carl. Lindsey, final word is yours.
Sure. I'll just add my thanks alongside my colleagues. This has been a really fruitful conversation, and I think it highlights the real glaring reality that you have not been given a seat at the table, and that has to happen immediately, and in legislative drafting, budget drafting, and in conversations vis-a-vis how we work with our state partners as well. I spent a decade managing public parks in the city, and the bid space, everything from Bryant Park to Harold and Greeley Squares and 34th Street Partnership and what would ultimately become the Meatpacking District. And then I was in municipal finance for a number of years because I wanted to understand how we fund government infrastructure. Ultimately, I was the Housing and Job Secretary, as I've mentioned tonight, helping to pass paid family leave, the $50 minimum wage. I got hundreds of millions of dollars for underfunded NYCHA when the federal government walked away. But usually people know me because I was the first one to come forward against Andrew Cuomo and his many abuses of power. And I think that's important because you need to know that you're going to have a fighter who is courageous at every moment. And I will be. I think that combination of 2 decades of experience in New York, in the public sector, working at every level of government is why Brad Lander has endorsed me, why the Working Families Party has endorsed me, why the current mayor of New York City has endorsed me. 6 city council members have endorsed me, including the co-chairs both of the Progressive Caucus, which I will join when elected, which will enable us to get a lot done and a big part of the mayor's mandate. And I will promise you that I'm excited to work very closely with you. I have both really in agreement with a lot of the concerns that you have and really excited to find ways that I can help make things better. And I really look forward to the partnership. And I'm so appreciative of our conversation today. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Lindsey. My final words are thank you so much for participating. I've enjoyed moderating this conversation, and I'm going to let Rebecca have the final word as our host.
Thank you, Trevor. Yes, thank you all very much for spending your evening here with us. Thank you, Trevor and Jean, for coming up with the idea to host this debate. It's the first one that we've done, so we look forward to doing more in the future, perhaps, and to working with you going forward and the City Council.